Well, LCBC, it's so good to have you with us on another snowy, wintry weekend in Pennsylvania. And can I just say a special welcome to Parker Hill Church? We're so glad to have you with us today as well. And for those of you that may be unfamiliar with Parker Hill Church, Parker Hill is a great church, and it's a community of close to 2,000 people up in the Wilkes-Barre, Scranton area. And can I just say, too, for those of you that are not familiar with LCBC, we're actually a community of people that whose lives have just been changed by Jesus Christ, and we meet in 15 locations scattered across central Pennsylvania and online. And LCBC, that's what it stands for. It's just Lives Changed by Christ. And last fall, LCBC and Parker Hill decided to partner together in our efforts to impact the state of Pennsylvania. And so we're excited about the prospect of joining more closely together in the days ahead in order to see more and more lives changed by Jesus Christ. Well, for the last 5 weeks, actually throughout the month of January, we've been challenging ourselves to rethink our lives. And after a crazy year in 2020, we've been challenging ourselves to ask ourselves a question: where in my life do I need to make some changes? And I hope that you've taken this opportunity to examine your life, and I trust that you've been opening up yourself to God's nudges and direction so that you can fully experience everything that God has created you to experience in this life. Now, today as we close out this series of studies, I'm going to get real specific with you. Today, I want to challenge you to examine a part of your life that odds are it's not going that well for you. As a matter of fact, in 2019, Forbes magazine said that over 70% of all Americans are struggling in this area of their lives. Other experts have actually said it's closer to 90% of all Americans are struggling in this area. And what these experts are actually saying, and what you and I know to be true because you live with the pressure every day, and you live with a heavy weight on your shoulders every day and every moment of your life. And so what these experts are saying is 9 out of 10 of us are living on the brink. We're living on the edge. 9 out of 10 of us are just one unexpected medical bill, one broken down car, one malfunctioning washing machine, one unplanned pregnancy. 9 out of 10 of us are one surprise away from financial disaster. And so today, I actually want to challenge you to rethink how you manage your money. Because you don't have to live with that kind of pressure. You weren't designed to carry that kind of weight day in and day out. And so what I want to do is actually tell you a story about a man who, like so many of us, he wasn't managing his money very well. And saying he's not managing his money well would actually be a great understatement. So I want to ask you to grab a Bible and open it up to Luke chapter 19, verse 1. And whether it's a hard copy, whether you use your mobile app, however you happen to be reading the Bible these days, grab it. And if you would, open it up to Luke chapter 19. I'm going to begin reading in verse 1 of Luke 19. Luke is telling us this story. He says, Jesus entered Jericho, made his way through the town. There was a man named Zacchaeus. He was the chief tax collector in the region, and he had become very rich. He tried to get a look at Jesus, but he was too short to see over the crowd, so he ran ahead and climbed up a sycamore fig tree beside the road, for Jesus was going to pass by. When Jesus came by, he looked up at Zacchaeus and called him by name. He said, "Zacchaeus," he said, "quick, come down. I must be a guest in your home today." Now, if you grew up like I did, going to church as a kid, then you know all about this man, Zacchaeus. And you've even sung the song about Zacchaeus. You know it. Zacchaeus was a wee little man. Yes, a wee little man was he. He climbed up in a sycamore tree to see what he could see. And Jesus said, "Zacchaeus, you come down from there, because I'm going to your house today." Now, I know you know the song. You've sung that song before. And in thinking about it today, I wonder, is that even still politically correct? I mean, can we call him a wee little man? Is that right to say that anymore? But anyway, that's what the song said. And so we go on, verse 6. Zacchaeus quickly climbed down, took Jesus to his house in great excitement and joy. But the people were displeased. He has gone to be the guest of a notorious sinner, they grumbled. And so let's talk for a moment about why Zacchaeus was considered this notorious sinner. See, being a notorious sinner was all about Zacchaeus and the way he handled money. Zacchaeus was a tax collector. And in his day, tax collectors were generally free to collect extra taxes from the people in order to make a profit. And so opportunities for theft, for fraud, corruption, they abounded in the lives of tax collectors. And while you may have sung the song about Zacchaeus as a kid, have you ever stepped back and just thought for a moment and say, why in the world does Zacchaeus want to see Jesus in the first place? I mean, what was it that drove this man, this wee little man, a tax collector, to climb up into a tree just so he could see Jesus? So let me tell you what I think. I think Zacchaeus climbed this sycamore tree not only because he was short of stature, not only because he couldn't see, but I think he climbed that tree because he wasn't happy with his life. I think he was so determined to see if this miracle worker named Jesus could do something for him. Because even though he had all of the money he could possibly want, Zacchaeus still wasn't happy with his life. I mean, what we know is that Zacchaeus had caused so much pain in other people's lives because he was a tax collector who he extorted money from the other people, and as a result had become wealthy, but instead of enjoying his money, he was miserable. And he knew something major needed to change in his life, and it needed to change fast. He knew a power greater than his human strength was going to be necessary to make these changes. And so Zacchaeus actually hears about this miracle worker who's passing through town. And this miracle worker, he heard, may have even had supernatural powers. And so Zacchaeus decides he's going to go and see for himself. And you know what happens. I mean, Jesus sees Zacchaeus up in a tree, and so Jesus invites himself over to Zacchaeus' home for dinner. And Jesus actually invites himself into the home of a cheater, a swindler, a thief, and this scammer. And the people all around him were upset. And do you realize what was true of Zacchaeus is actually true of you and me as well. What was true about Zacchaeus and you and me is that we typically don't try to change our lives until we're hurting so badly that we must make a change. And I don't know why that is. Either you and I are too stubborn to make changes, or perhaps we're eternal optimists, and we just kind of keep thinking, well, tomorrow it's going to be better, tomorrow it's going to be better, it's going to come tomorrow, everything's going to work out. And so we tend not to make changes until we're hurting so badly that we become desperate. And we just have to make a change. And too often, we don't turn to Jesus until we hurt so badly that we've got nowhere else to turn and no one else to turn to. And so Zacchaeus climbs out of the tree, and he takes Jesus home for dinner. And something over the course of the dinner happens that just rocks Zacchaeus to the core of his being. And Scripture doesn't actually give us any details as to how the conversation unfolded, but what we know for sure is that Zacchaeus' life, it was tipped upside down because of this encounter with Jesus over dinner. He had an encounter with Jesus, and his life was different. And evidence that he was a changed man is the fact that Zacchaeus rethinks the way he manages his money. Look again at Luke chapter 19, but go to verse 9. It says, "Meanwhile, Zacchaeus stood before the Lord and said, 'I'll give half of my wealth to the poor, Lord, and if I have cheated people on their taxes, I'll give them back 4 times as much.'" He's a changed man. He's going to manage his money differently. So Jesus responded, "Salvation has come to this home today, for this man has shown himself to be a true son of Abraham. For the Son of Man," which was Jesus, that's what he would often call himself, "the Son of Man came to seek and save those who were lost." Meaning that Jesus came to save those who need changes in their lives. Meaning that Jesus came to save those who need to rethink their lives. And so Jesus comes out of the house after dinner, and he says to the crowd of grumbling people that are watching, he says, "Salvation has come to this house." Somebody who was lost just got found. Somebody who was feeling deeply guilty has just been cleansed. Somebody who felt powerless over his problem has found a higher power. See, Zacchaeus was a man who was changed by Jesus Christ. Zacchaeus was a life changed by Christ. And that actually makes sense. Because what we've been learning over the last several weeks is that we can't change ourselves. It doesn't matter how hard we try, we can't change ourselves. And Jesus says we've got to be born again. Jesus says if we really want to experience true change in our lives, if we want to experience anything more than simply just rearranging things in our lives, he says we need to have an encounter with him. We need an encounter with Jesus. And when Jesus changed his life, the first thing that Zacchaeus did was to change how he handled his finances. Zacchaeus, he just confessed how he'd been terrible when it came to money, and it led to this whole new way of managing money for himself. And there's evidence of this complete change of heart towards his relationship with money, because Zacchaeus actually comes out after dinner and he says, Lord, you just need to understand, I'm going to pay back double anyone and everyone that I've ever cheated. And odds are, you and I don't handle our money exactly like Zacchaeus. But my guess is we still need to rethink the way that we manage our money. And for the most part, there's only about 5 different ways that you and I can spend our money. There's only 5 things that you and I can do with our money. And let me just tell you what those 5 are. First of all, we can spend it. And let's be honest, we're all pretty good at that. We can repay debt. We can pay taxes. I mean, hopefully you're doing that. If not, you're going to get yourself into trouble. You can save your money. And finally, you can give your money. And basically, those are the only 5 things that all of us can do, all of us ever do with our money. And for most of us, and for most Americans, this is actually the order of priority, isn't it? I mean, priority number 1 is spend. Let's go spend what we have. Priority number 2 is let's just pay for the things that we couldn't afford when we spent initially. And priority number 3 is, oh yeah, I got to pay my taxes. And then if there's anything left over, maybe I'll save some. And if there's anything left over after saving some, maybe I'll give some to people in my community. Maybe I'll just give some to my church or local charities or whatever it might be. And these are the 5 things that we do with our money. And essentially, it's the order in which we do these 5 things. It's our priority list. And now let me kind of go through that same list one more time, but let me put a little bit of a different spin on it. Number 1 is me. Number 2, that's for me. And number 3, well, that's for America. I mean, that's me, but it's for America. Number 4 is for me, and then number 5 is for God and maybe others. And so let me just go over that again because it's kind of complicated. It's me, America. Again, that's kind of we, me, and then give. And that's our priority list. That's what most of us do. Now, the problem is this. If God is even on our priority list, at best, that puts God last on the list, which essentially means that God gets whatever we have left over. If I haven't spent it all, if I don't owe it all, if the government hasn't taken it all, and if I haven't saved it all for myself for later, if there's anything left over, then I'm going to be really, really generous with God and with others, and I'm going to say, God, here's what I want you to have. In other words, God gets my leftovers. Now, here's what's interesting. In spite of the fact that most of us simply give God our leftovers, that doesn't keep us from saying, that doesn't even cause any of us to hesitate on our part when we find ourselves in trouble to turn and go to God and say, God, I need you to help me. God, I need you to help me pay this bill. God, I've got to sell this house. God, I need a new job. You need to help me now. And it doesn't cause us to even hesitate for a moment to say, God, I need more money. God, I've got to send my kids through college. And so, God, I need them to get a scholarship. God, I need you to help me take care of me. God, help me to take over. Oh, and if there's anything left over, it's yours, God. But right now, I'm in trouble. And so, God, why aren't you helping me? Where are you, God? You know I'm struggling. I knew I couldn't trust you, God. And so I've got to be honest. I don't know exactly what God is thinking. But if I were God, I know what I'd be thinking. Why? Why should I possibly get involved with your finances? I mean, you pretty well shut me out of the whole thing, and I'm just like an emergency fund. I'm an afterthought, and I think I'd say, you know what? You don't need to bother coming looking for me. And so here's the good news. God does offer to actually take care of our needs. He does. He offers to take care of all of our needs. Jesus actually promises that God will take care of all of your needs. I mean, look at what Jesus actually said, and it's recorded by Matthew. Jesus said this. He said, seek the kingdom of God above all else and live righteously, and He, God, will give you everything that you need. Jesus says God will give you everything that you need. But did you catch all that Jesus said? I mean, you caught that part. Jesus said God will give you everything you need if you flip your priority list. Put God and his kingdom first. Take him off the bottom, put him first. Then he will give you everything that you need. In other words, flip your priority list. And the priority list becomes all of a sudden, instead of give at the bottom, gives at the top. Instead of save being next, it saves at the top, and pay taxes stays about the same, repaying debt, and then you kind of live and spend whatever is left over. And Jesus said, here's what I want you to do. I want you to turn your priority list upside down. I want you to put me first. I want you to seek me first. And if you do, now what you've done is you've thrown the door wide open. Now you've invited me into your life. And now that you've invited me into your life and into the core of your life, your money, your stuff, your security, your future, I want you to seek me first. And then all of this other stuff that you prioritize before ahead of me, he said, all of this other stuff that you've worried about time and time and time again, he said, all of this other stuff, I'm going to provide that for you anyway. And so he says, seek my kingdom, and all of these other things will be given to you. Now, let me be real clear. This isn't about getting rich. God never promises that if we put him first at the top of our priority list, he doesn't say, if you flip the priority list, then all of a sudden you're going to be rich. This is about reprioritizing our list. This is about a sense of relief that comes with knowing that God is now the one who's in charge of taking care of all of your needs. I mean, think about that. That God would all of a sudden say, I'm going to take care of all of your needs. This is about that sense of peace that comes from knowing that God is the one who's invaded your life, and he says, you've thrown open the door of your life. You've thrown it wide open for me. Now I'm going to take care of you. So about 430 years before Jesus said these words, the same words were actually spoken through a man named Malachi. Malachi was speaking to a group of people, and their priority list pretty much looked like yours and mine. It was me, America, me, give, but their list didn't include America. Their list, it was me, Persian Empire, me, and then give. And so speaking through the prophet Malachi, God said exactly what Jesus would say 430 years later. He said, put me first, and then I'll take care of everything that you need. But Malachi, God speaking through Malachi, took it even a step further. And so he spells out in great detail what it looks like to put God first in our lives. And it starts with our money. And so today, I actually want to give you God's plan that he gave to those people through Malachi. And so to give you this plan, I'm actually going to reach back into the LCBC archives. I'm actually going to reach back into an illustration that I think makes God's plan and putting God first as simple and as clear as I've ever seen it. And I don't know that I can or we can say it any more clearly than we said it back then. And God's plan for putting him first starts with our money. And God's plan involves only one word. And if we would choose to follow this one-word plan, God says, you will experience freedom from any financial stress, because God says if you put him first, he will be the one that takes care of all of your needs. And so I want you to listen to this one-word plan and listen to how God says you can experience financial peace. So here's what God says about living free from financial stress. And I know when I tell you, you're going to groan. But this is what God says about living free of financial stress when it comes to our finances. God has a very simple plan, and it's a very simple plan with our finances. And he says it's a way to demonstrate to him that we trust him. And he says, when you demonstrate that you're trusting me, he says, I will take care of you. And the word that he uses to describe financial peace, it's the word tithing. You go, oh, tithing, I can't believe it, Dave. You're going to talk about giving when I'm struggling with my finances. But see, you don't understand. There's so many misconceptions about tithing, what it is and what it's not. So let me tell you what it's not. Tithing is not even about money. You think it's a money thing. You think it's about giving money away. It has nothing to do with that. It's not even about money. It's about trusting God. Do I trust God? And we can talk a good game when it comes to following God. And we could say, oh, I desperately want to follow you, God. But when it comes to our finances, bottom line, he says, look, I just want you to show me. Show me that you actually trust me. Another thing that tithing is not, it's not even about giving. It's actually returning to God what is already his. Everything we have belongs to him. And we think it's ours. We think we've worked so hard to earn it. God says, no, it's mine, and I'm letting you use it for a while. And you do realize if you were to die today, tomorrow somebody else will be driving your car. Somebody else will be living in your house. Somebody else will be eating off your plate. Somebody else will be sleeping in your bed. I mean,
it's not ours. It's just returning to God what's already His. It's not about giving. And we think it's about giving. And see, giving is tipping. Giving is when you go out to eat today or tomorrow, and the waiter or the waitress serves you and serves you well, then you're going to give to them a tip. And you're going to say, good job. Just want you to know, good job. And you give them a tip. God says, this isn't about giving. It's not about tipping. He says, this is about demonstrating the fact that you trust me, that I trust God. And now, God gets even more specific about what He means when He talks about tithing. So when He talks about tithing, He actually gets specific. He says, tithing is returning 1/10 to God what God has already given to us. It's His anyway. And then He says, if you will give 1/10 back to me, if you'll return back to me 1/10, He says, then I will bless the other 90%. I will bless it and do things in your life that you can't even begin to imagine. In other words, God is saying, I'll make you a deal. You give me, return to me 1/10, and I'll bless the rest. You bring to me, return to me 1/10, and I'll take care of you. You return to me 1/10, and I'll make sure that all of your needs are met. We can actually read about this principle in Proverbs. Proverbs is a book of not necessarily promises. Proverbs is a book that says, if you do this, this is the way life generally goes. So it's not a guarantee, but it says this is what typically happens when you do what it says. And here's the Proverbs chapter 3. Honor the Lord with your wealth and with the best part of everything you produce. Then He will fill your barns with grain and your vats will overflow with good wine. He says, just honor me. Return to me 1/10 of what I've already given you. And what's interesting with this is the people that were originally being talked to in Proverbs were people that were farmers. They lived off the land, and so their wealth, and again, notice that it says wealth. It's not serve me with your time, give time to me, because sometimes people say, well, I don't have really any wealth or finances to give to you, God, and so I'll just give you my time and serve you. No, it says your wealth. So for them, it would have been produce. And God just says, look, if I give you 10 of these, then He says, I just want you to take one and return it back to me. Just return one to me, God actually says. And then He says, I'm going to give you 10 of these, and as I give you 10 of these, just one, just return one back to me. That's what tithing is. And it's not about giving. It's not about tipping. It's about, do I trust God? Do I trust God with my life? Because all of it's His anyway. And so He says, just one of these, you return to me. The rest you can use for yourself. It's yours. Do with it as you please. And He says, if you bring one of these to me, the rest you can do as you please. And then He says, I will bless this beyond anything you could imagine. I will bless this beyond what you could do if you had all of this under your control. And so God makes this real interesting kind of promise and thing that He's saying to us. And He just says, trust me. Trust me on this. We get hung up because we tend to think all of this is ours. And it's kind of like when I was growing up, my grandparents, they kind of hit a stage of their life where they were big into timeshares, and they were always buying timeshares. And timeshares are kind of this funny deal where you have a vacation home, but you really don't. You think you own it, but you don't. You own it for 1 week, you think, but you really don't. But we would use the timeshares, and we would go on vacations at my grandparents' timeshares, and we would stay at the resort, and we would use the pool and all the amenities that go along with it. And we love being there at the timeshare. But you know what happens at the end of the timeshare? Your week, 10 o'clock Saturday morning, they knock at the door and say, you got to be out of here. Because it's not yours. You're just using it. There are 51 other people that have 51 other weeks that are going to be using that same building that they don't even own either. You're just using it. And God says to us, look, you're just using all of my stuff. This is all my stuff. And so when I give you 10 of these, then He says, I'm just asking you to return one, and then you keep the rest and you do whatever you want with the rest. Now, there were a group of people that God had instructed to do this very thing that we talked about right now. And this group of people, they stopped doing this part of it. They just kind of collected all of it over here, and they didn't do this part. They neglected this part. And so God actually had some interesting comments for them. So go to the book of Malachi. Book of Malachi, a very last book of the Old Testament, right before Matthew. It's page 729. Malachi chapter 3. I just want you to see what God said to these people who had kind of stopped doing, they had stopped doing what God asked them to do. And He makes a real strong statement to them. Malachi chapter 3. I'm going to begin reading about, let's go verse 8. God says to the people, should people cheat God Yet you have cheated me. But you ask, what do you mean, God? When did we ever cheat you? God said, you cheated me out of the tithes and offerings due to me. You are under a curse, for your whole nation has been cheating me. God says to this group of people, look, you're cheating me. All I've asked you to do, he says, I'll give you all of this, but I'm asking you to return one of these every time you get 10, and then I will bless the rest. He says, you're not doing that for me. You're cheating me, is what he says. And then he makes a statement. He says, you're living under a curse. You've got all of it over here, but it's not working out so well for you because you're living under a curse because you've cheated me, is what he's saying to the people. And it's interesting, we get all hung up on how we make this so much more complicated than we need to make it. We go, I don't really understand how this is going to work for me, David. How do I figure out 1/10? Well, again, it's just 1 out of every 10. And so you figure out what your paycheck is every 2 weeks, and you just take it by 1/10, and then you just give that to God. You say, well, but it's so much more complicated for me, David. I work off a commission, then it's not that hard. Every time you get a check for a commission, then you just 1/10, you return it to God. And it's not that hard. And the people that God was talking to said, we need all of this, and we need this too, God. And he says, you're cheating me. And now you find yourself living under a curse. And so he goes on, verse 10, he says, look, bring all of the tithes into the storehouse so there will be enough food in my temple. So he gets some real specific instructions. He says, bring it, return it to me. And he says, bring the whole thing, not just part of it, the entire 10%. And I've just got to say to you, I don't understand this fully, and it's not like it's a magical thing, but there's something about the 10% where God says, look, this is kind of the standard that I set out there. Seems to be the key that unlocks God's blessings for all of the rest that is here. And so he says, bring all of it, bring 10%. He says where to bring it. He actually says, bring it to the church or the storehouse, which more conservative theologians would say that's kind of contemporary church today. And the reason why, he says, is so that God can accomplish his work, so that all of his work can be accomplished. So he's very specific about what he has to say and what's going to be done with that. And then he makes this promise after that. So again, verse 10, he says, if you do this, he says, I will open the windows of heaven for you. I will pour out a blessing so great you won't have enough room to take it in. He says, just try it. Just do this. He says, I will take care of you. If you do this, if you bring me one of these every time you get 10 of them, I will take care of you, and I will open up the windows of heaven, just like he did with the woman, filled to the brim her pots were. He says, I will bless the rest of this in ways that you can't even begin to imagine. And then he kind of lays out this challenge. He says, just try it. He says something that he's never said before, and he never says again. He says, I just want you to try it. Put me to the test. Put me to the test. Come on, try this, and just do it, because I will take care of you. Now, what's interesting is there are very few tangible ways that we can prove that we really are trusting God. But one of the ways we can do that is with this right here. He says, look, you can prove it. You can demonstrate it to me if you'll go ahead and do it and put me to the test. And you go, you know what? I don't know that I can do this. David, you don't understand my situation. If I do this, it's going to take some changes in my life. And I think God says, exactly. That's the whole point of this. You say, if I do this, some things are going to have to change. And God says, exactly. In order for God to be number one in my life, I'm going to have to move some things around. And God is saying, exactly. That's the way it works. That's part of it. And here's what I also know. If you've been following Jesus for a long time, if you grew up in church for a long time, you've come up with all kinds of excuses as to why you don't need to do this. You have biblical reasons, you have theological reasons, you've talked to somebody that says, this doesn't really apply to us today. And so you found ways to blow this off. God just says, actually, I still want you to do this. I still want you to demonstrate that you trust me. Jesus actually said it this way in Matthew 23. He said, you should tithe, yes, but do not neglect the more important things. In other words, the baseline is tithing, but also don't neglect the more important things. And yesterday somebody came up and said, so the more important things, does that mean like my mortgage? Does that mean my car payments? Does that mean dinner out? Does that mean coffee at Starbucks? The more important things. That's not what Jesus is saying. Jesus is saying at the very least you ought to tithe. Don't neglect the more important things like mercy and faith and justice. But he says, trust God. Demonstrate that you're trusting God with your finances. And then again, he makes that challenge. He says, just try me. Test me on this. And if you do, he says, your crops will be abundant, for I will guard them from insects and diseases. Your grapes will not fall from the vine before they are ripe, says the Lord of heaven's armies. Then all the nations will call you blessed, for your land will be such a delight, says the Lord of heaven's armies. He says, just try me. Try me. Put me to the test on this. And this is so basic, and it is not complicated. And we make it complicated, and so we find excuses not to do this, and we don't demonstrate to God that we trust Him. And so what happens is we find ourselves trying to live on all of this, and we're not making ends meet, and we're struggling, and I understand how it goes. And you may even be thinking, okay, I wish I could do that, David, but I can't do that right now. I really can't. And I know it's hard. At least it's a hard decision to make. But once you start, God begins to bless everything else, and it's not so hard at that point. Ruth and I, when we were first married, we said, we're going to do this. We're going to live the way God asked us to do. And so from the moment we were married, we began to tithe, and we gave the 10%, whatever it was, as it changed over the years, and then even beyond the tithe, and we've watched God bless us in amazing ways. Amazing ways, where we've had cars last a lot longer than our cars ever should have gone. So I've said this before, but I wasn't much then, and I'm not a whole lot better now at changing the oil or things like that. And I always figured every 25,000 miles or so seemed to be the appropriate time to change oil in cars. And so we had cars that would go 250, 300,000 miles, and they just went further than they ever should. We had washing machines run longer than they should. There was a period of about 9 years where whenever we would fly, we would always go to the desk and say, if this is overbooked, we'd like to be notify us, we'd love to get bumped, and so we would get bumped, and they'd give us free tickets on another flight, and so we went about 8 or 9 years without ever buying tickets to fly. We flew a lot because we kept getting bumped, and we stayed in timeshares from my grandmother for free, and God was blessing what we had in incredible ways. Can I just say, if you're young, if you're in high school, if you're college, now is the time to start this. Don't wait. If you're just getting married, now is the time to start this. Don't wait. But I know the way we think. We go, okay, this is wonderful. I guess that's the way it ought to work. But we go, you know what? We need to eat dinner out. And so we'll just borrow from God and take some from God, and we'll grab dinner. And God, you don't mind if we eat off of your table, do you? And so we kind of take some of God's, but it's okay, God. I'm sure you don't mind. And so we take some of God's and put it back on our table, and God, we would do this, but mortgage is huge, God, and I don't think we can do the mortgage and give to you 10%, God, and then school debt. God, do you know? God, do you understand how much school debt I have? There's no way I could do this, God. I've got to pay off my school debts, and so I'm going to take some from you, God, and kind of take care of that school loan, and kids, God, are going to need to go to college someday, and I don't want them to be strapped with school loans. And so, God, I need to begin to save some money for school, and so, God, you'll understand, right, God? And someday I'm going to retire, God, I hope, and to do that, it's going to take some. And we come up with all these excuses, all these reasons why we can't give to God, and before we know it, we've taken all of this from God and said, God, I know that you said you'd take all of this and that you would bless it, but I need it. God, I desperately need it. And before you know it, we kind of show up at church on the weekends, and we give to God, and we kind of give him this. Just kind of tips, whatever I've got in my pocket, whatever's left over at the end of the month. God, that's what I got this month, God. I need all of this to work on. And you stand back and you go, I don't understand why God isn't blessing me. I don't understand why God isn't taking care of me. And he says to the same thing. He would say the same thing he said to the people in Malachi. You're cheating me. I've just asked you to return to me 1/10, and then I said I would bless beyond what you could ever imagine everything else. But you're trying to figure it out yourself. You don't need me. You're not trusting me. You're trusting in yourself. And all you're doing is giving me tips. And so here's my challenge to you. Why not put God to the test? And I understand it's a hard conversation. If you're married, then you and your spouse, you've got to have this conversation. It's going to be an awkward conversation. But if you're living under financial stress, God says, I have a plan for you, and it's this. And you've been trying to take care of it here. How's that working for you? And how are you feeling that way? God says you don't have to do it that way. Now, we try to do everything we can as a church to alleviate as much of the pain as we can as you jump into this and take away even the risk. So we have a thing we call the 90-day tithing challenge. And the 90-day tithe challenge is this. You make the decision to follow God, and you demonstrate to him that you're trusting him by tithing for 90 days. And at the end of 90 days, if God hasn't taken what you have, the 90%, and blessed you and taken care of you in some way, then we'll just return whatever you've done over the 90 days. But don't think it's about us, and don't think it's about church. If you think it is about us and us trying to get your money, then give it to another church. It's not about us, it's about you. And living with financial stress up to here, and God saying, you don't have to do that. It's about trust me. Do you trust me? God says. And so you can go to the website and find out how to get plugged into the 90-day challenge, but I would just encourage you, jump in. Don't hold back. And why would you hold back when God says, I can take and I can do more with the 90% than you could possibly ever think of doing? And
I know. You were hoping that God's plan somehow involved him giving you more money. But you need to understand it's not about the amount of money that you think you need. It's really about what are you doing with what you happen to have right now. It's all about trusting God to take care of you right now. It's all about putting God first. And so LCBC, Parker Hill, can I just say to you, if you've been cheating God, knock it off. And instead of cheating God, I really want to challenge you to put God first. I want to challenge you to choose to honor God. I want to challenge you to choose to trust him with your life. I want to challenge you to choose to trust him with your money. Choose to demonstrate that God is number one in your life and do it in the most tangible way possible. Do it with your money. And then just step back and watch. Watch God take care of everything that you need. Can I just say, if you're cheating God right now, and the fascinating thing is, some of you, you've heard this over and over and over and over, and you keep coming up with all these reasons why you can't do this, and so you continue to cheat God. But if you're cheating God right now, can I just say, don't even think about going out and buying that new dress. Or if you're cheating God right now, don't even think about going out and buying that set of clubs that you've been eyeing all winter long. And if you've been cheating God, don't even think about getting the latest version of Minecraft or Fortnite. And definitely don't think about going out and buying that new car. And for goodness sakes, until you stop cheating God, don't even think about buying that bigger house. And can I just ask you, why wouldn't you want the God of the universe to take control of your life? I mean, let's just think about it. Why would you not want God to provide you with everything that you're going to need in life? Why wouldn't you want God to open up the windows of heaven on you? I mean, how amazing would it be for you to put God first on your priority list and then one day be able to step back and say, you know what, I don't understand it, I can't explain it, but something happened in my heart and something happened with my finances and something happened in my family, and I can't really even explain it on paper, but something is different. And you and I will both know it's because you reprioritized your entire financial system, and now God is giving you everything that you need. And so why not take God up on his challenge? And why not put God to the test? I mean, you heard me talk about the 90-day tithing challenge, and you can find it on LCBC Church website. And if there's anyone that you're thinking, okay, I think I want to do this. It doesn't matter if you're online. It doesn't matter if you're in person. We'll even make it available for you at Parker Hill, because this isn't about LCBC. This is about you putting God first. And so here's what we're going to do. As we finish, Matt is going to sing for us. And Matt's actually going to sing a song. It's a commitment to God. It's a song that speaks directly to God, and it makes a commitment to putting God first, to putting God at the top of our priority list. And so can I just ask you, as Matt sings, I hope you'll use the words of this song. It's a familiar song. And I hope you'll use the words of this song, make them your own, and make them your own personal commitment to God. And I hope that you will speak these exact same words back to God as a commitment. Say, God, I'm gonna put you number one in my life. And today, make up your mind to put God first. Make whatever course corrections you need to make right now. Flip your list. Give, save, pay taxes, repay debt, and then live on the rest. And then can I just say, hold on. hold on, because God is going to take care of you, even in the roughest of times. And hold on and watch what He does for you. You're going to be amazed.
Take
know what's going on right now. Some of you, you've already decided you can't do this. You've already decided to blow this off. I mean, your expenses, you just can't do it. And yet God is nudging you, and he's kind of poking at you, and some of you, you've blown them off, but then some of you are going to say, you know what, okay, God, I'm going to flip the list, put you at the top, and it's as scary as I'll get out. I don't think this is going to work, but God, I'm going to trust you. And I think God is in heaven going, yes, that's exactly where you need to be. Trust in me. Let's do this thing together. I will take care of everything that you need. LCBC and Parker Hill, I think these next few days and weeks and months and years are going to be exciting to watch and see how God leads each and every one of us individually, all because we've chosen to make him our number one priority, even with our money. And I tell you, I can't wait to hear your stories of how scared you were to step out and do this, and to make God your number one priority, to flip your list, but then God showed up and he gave you everything that you needed. I can't wait to hear your stories of how your life has been changed by Christ. Just like Zacchaeus, you, a life changed by Christ. So if you'd like to talk or pray with somebody about this, or really about anything that you might be struggling with today, right now the chat on the screen will remain open for the next 10 minutes or so. Stick around, let us know how we can pray for you, or you can go to LCBC, the website, at any time and click on the prayer button. Let us know how we can be praying for you. If you happen to be in one of our LCBC locations, there are people down in the front left corner of each of our auditoriums, and when we're finished, come on down. They would love to pray and talk with you. And whether you are at LCBC or Parker Hill, can I just say, be sure to invite somebody to join us next week as we start a brand new series. We're calling it It's Complicated. It's about relationships, and you and I both know how complicated relationships can be. And so send somebody a link to our gathering so they can join you online, or invite them to meet you here in person. I don't think that you'll regret that you did. So LCBC, Parker Hill, may the Lord bless and protect you. May the Lord smile on you and be gracious to you. May the Lord show you his favor and give you his peace. Thanks for being here. We'll see you next week.